Alright, welcome everybody. It's been a week and we're now back again. In today's video, we're going to cover statements and JavaScript, what those are, along with a little bit about the syntax and a little bit about variables, because those are pretty much the needed things. So again, if today's video is a bit longer, just like the last one, that's because I'm trying to get into the nitty-gritty stuff so that people can understand how JavaScript actually works. I'm by far not an expert in this, but I do know a fair bit about JavaScript, so I think I qualify enough to explain a few things for those who are struggling a little bit trying to, learn stuff, especially after I've done that hellish thing of learning Java. Anyway, so you might notice that this file is a bit different, so I want you to bear in mind that the source file has been changed in this file. It's been changed to 2-js-ssv, which is related to today's video, and this is the file, and this might seem familiar to you. That's because in last week's video I mentioned that with the first button, when we pressed it, it's changed the text to hello world. However, here we do not have any functions, nothing. We're just leaving it as it is. That's on purpose. Look at what will happen right now. So remember, it should say a paragraph. However, with our script in place, it's going to replace it with statements in JS, because this is a statement. A statement is pretty much a line of code that changes or does something with a following element on the web page or with the web page itself. At least in the case of JavaScript. In our case, it's going to change a paragraph with the ID text to statements in JavaScript. So this text, a paragraph, will be changed to statements in JS. So if I go to the file now and refresh the page, you'll notice that it quickly changes. See how it quickly changes? It quickly changes to statements in JS from a paragraph to statements in JS. So that's what it does. That's pretty much a statement. A statement is pretty much how should I define this? A statement is a part of a JavaScript program, and a JavaScript program is a list of statements that can be executed by the computer. So basically what we're doing is we're letting the computer know, hey, I want you to change this text to this text right here. A little bit of a refresher. Now we can expand on this, so let me show you how we're going to do this. Let's keep this document get element by ID thing here. I'm going to show you something really neat. So I'm going to define a few variables. What are variables? Variables are basically defined using statements, and they have to have a specific keyword attached to them. For example, in JavaScript, to define a variable, we use either var or let, depending on what we need to do. In this example, to keep it all simple, we're going to use var. I know it's not the best, but it's one of the better ones to show you the basics of how this language works. And we're going to define 3 variables. Let's say we want to add 2 numbers together and store the result, and we then want to print out the process that we use to count it up, the problem itself. We want to write out the problem itself. There we go. I wasn't able to get it out. So we're going to define 3 variables: x, y, and z. Make sure to end it with a semicolon. That's our first statement in this file. Next, we're going to assign a value. To assign a value to one of these, what you have to do is you have to type in the name of the variable. As you can see, it already says var x undefined. See, it says over here. What you want to do is add an equal sign and separate it by spaces. It's a good practice to have it separated. I'm going to cover it when we're going to cover syntax, so you guys know what's going on. Next, we're going to give a value to our variable y. Let's say we want to give our variable y the number 7. So now we have 2 variables defined. We have variable x defined with the statement x equals 5 semicolon. So x has now the value of 5. Y with this statement has now a value of 7, just like defined here. But I said that we want to add them together. To do so, we're going to use our third variable called z. And what we do with this is we type in z equals, and then we want to add them together. To do so, type in x plus y and end it with a semicolon. And that's our fourth statement. We now have 4 statements written out like this, only for the sole purpose of adding them together. However, if I decide to, write it out, nothing's gonna happen. Like, everything's gonna be gone. Well, of course nothing's gonna happen because we're replacing it with nothing. So here's what we're gonna do. We're going to do x. No, not like that. Watch what we're gonna do. We're going to make it write out that text for us. So we're going to do x plus, separate it, make a space, plus y, because and separate these with spaces so that people don't scream at you in the forums that you did not format it properly. And then you wanna do another one of these, and you wanna add a equal sign there and separate it. And then what you wanna do is you want to, I'm making sure to not go over 80 because that's really bad. And now we're going to add just the result like so. So pretty much what this statement will do, it will change this text, a paragraph, to our calculation right here with hopefully everything intact. In fact, I just realized, there we go, and what we could have done, simplify it a lot more just like this. So now it's separated even further than it should have been, and it will still produce the same result. And we're still under 80 characters in length. So what will now happen? What will now happen is if I refresh the page, you'll notice it writes out our equation that we've written. 5 plus 7 indeed is 12. So what we've done here is we've basically made here the calculation up here and stored the result of the calculation into z. And then we are writing it out. We want to write out x, which in our case is 5. Then add the plus sign, which we did. It's right here. And we want to write out the y variable, which is 7, which we did right here. Then write out the equal sign, which again is here. And then write out the value of the variable z, which in our case, after adding those two numbers, is indeed 12. So that's pretty much statements covered, like the basics of them at least, and one of the use cases you can do. There's also like white spaces, which basically tell you that you shouldn't, like, what will happen if you separate those or not, which is what I was dealing with here. But pretty much there's like no difference. Like, it doesn't really make a difference. For example, if I were to do this, or God forbid this, like remove the unnecessary white spaces, like so, but leave those in like I have there, it's still gonna produce the same result. There's nothing different. I just removed all the unnecessary white spaces. However, it's recommended to add those so it makes the code more readable. So I'll add those in real quick, and we get to continue. So that's something I wanted to mention. There's also line breaks, but it's often that you would like to avoid approaching the 80 columns, that you can see. I hope you can see that. Yeah, but you can see down here in this editor, we're at column 71, so we're really close to the upper limit. But still, you don't really have to break it. It pretty much is like better if you like wanna break it out. Break it at a point where it will like make sense, like this. I think the code should still work like it did before. Yeah, it still does, because you know, we ended the statement here and not here. So it still does work, and it's one of the methods you can use to avoid like having extremely long lines of code. There's also code blocks, however, and we did actually already use code blocks without us realizing. Code blocks are essentially the functions that we've used in the last video. Let me bring it up. This is a code block. This is a code block. This is a code block, and this is a code block. It's basically a function that can do multiple things. That's pretty much it. That's all there's to it. That's what a code block is. There are also like different functions, statements and such we can use. However, we're going to cover those later on, as we're going to cover loops, strings, arrays and such, and objects and functions and other things. Just bear that in mind. So that's statements for you. Again, the syntax, there's pretty much there are like set rules in JavaScript. So for example, if I were to write like decimal numbers, then like, you know, I would have to like add the decimal point there in order to make it write out. So for example, if I were to do 5.5 plus 7, it should do 12.5, which it does, and that's how you define a decimal number. That's pretty much it. There's not much else to it. You can also define strings that and they can be written with double quotes or single quotes. So for example, what I mean is, if I replace this with a, what did I just do? Oh wait, I realize now. So I'm gonna copy this with this one only, get rid of this, and we're going to separate this bad boy. And we're going to do this. And it's going to do the exact same thing. It's not gonna change anything. Watch. See? That's the exact same thing. It's just that you can use either double quotes or single quotes. It's up to you. Again, variables where it was like what we've defined here, it's the same thing. Operators are what basically define like what we want to do. So for example, we can use arithmetic operators like addition, subtraction, multiplication and division. So we just change this plus to anything that we need to change it to, and it will produce the needed result. There are also expressions you can use, like 5 times 10 or something, to make a bigger number, for example. There are also like keywords, and pretty much what a keyword is, for example, the keyword var tells the browser to create a variable, basically. So without it, it wouldn't create this variable, and therefore it will like spit out errors because it doesn't know what to do with it. We can, however, add comments, and there are multiple ways we can create comments. For example, let's say I want to comment this section out. Let me just copy this and create like sort of a comment example. Or actually, let's create one ourselves. So I'm going to show you two methods of which you can create comments. You can either use these double forward slashes for comments. So this is a comment number 1, and there is also a different method and one that I prefer, and that's a multi-line comment. So you do this, and then you have to do this. So pretty much this is like a opening and closing bracket, and you can use these even in a CSS file, which is used for styling web pages. So for example, this is a comment number 2. And they do the exact same thing, with the difference being this is a one-line comment, whereas this one is a multi-line comment. So you can pretty much keep on adding things like you see fit, and it won't affect the main code. In fact, I'm gonna save it like this, move this one line below, and I'm going to rerun the page. It still works the same way. It's just a comment. So that's how you like use comments. There's also one more thing, and that's really important when it comes to syntax. JavaScript is case sensitive. So what that means is if you want to like make a certain function or name a certain variable, you need to make sure that you type it out exactly as it is, because it is case sensitive, which means it checks for those uppercase letters. It's not like other languages where you can just type it how you please. You really have to pay attention to those uppercase letters. If you miss one, it's a totally different variable, therefore it's not gonna work. So that's something to remember. Also, something I want to mention, when it comes to the character set that JavaScript uses, it uses the Unicode character set, which pretty much covers all the possible characters and symbols in the world, so you don't have to worry about losing anything. I did in fact mention already, like, variables. There are, however, different types of variables. So for example, we have like, this is a expression here, and these are regular variables here, assigned variables. These are assigned variables, and these ones are, this is an expression. And what we can do, in fact, is we can also, hold on, let me see. Yeah, this is like a really neat thing. You can, in fact, assign values directly to what you need. So instead of having to write it out like this, I'm going to actually show you something really neat. If we're going to produce the exact same result, just bear with me. So I'm going to like move it like this, and this is one of the methods I've actually seen people do this, and it will achieve the exact same, like, the state, the thing, it will be the exact same. So we're going to, so we're going to give x the value of 5.5 again, and we're going to give y the value of 7 again. Now watch what happens if I decide to run this code. The exact same thing is happening, but we are not defining it manually over here. We are defining it here. So it does the exact same thing. So we can use one statement to cover many variables, and this is pretty much one of like many ways I've seen people optimize code. Then instead of having like multiple lines of variables like this, they can have just like one line, for example, like this. They can have like one line like this, and the code will still work the exact same way as it did in the first time. See, works the exact same way, nothing else to worry about. You can also undefine a variable, but I wouldn't like suggest it. Pretty much what you would do is, this is an undefined variable, however it's used here, so it is technically defined. If I want a undefined, I'll give here an a, for example, which is a undefined variable. Watch what happens if I decide to run it. Nothing has changed, right? It's still the same. Watch what happens if I press F12. You'll notice something. I open this, and you'll notice, wait, it doesn't say anything, what the hell? Oh yeah, and to change it you need to actually like use the variable in the text. So to show you that it actually does like work, I'm going to use the text thing here to my advantage, and I'm actually going to show you that it in fact does matter, that if you define another variable that like doesn't like work. So we're going to change the text, and we're going to use just one variable here, and that will in fact be a. Watch what happens if I decide to compile this, or not compile but run it. It will say undefined right here, and that's because we are using a variable that we did not define. So that was something I thought of like being somewhat interesting. Oops. I didn't realize that my keyboard has switched. Oh no. There we go. Get rid of that. Get rid of that. Place that back. And if I decide to relaunch, you can see it still works because we've commented out that a variable that we are not using anymore. So that's pretty much how you would test for a undefined variable. You can also do arithmetic with it, and you can also like chain strings together to like create different text, which is what we've actually used over here. We've chained these together. In fact, I didn't even have to define this. All I could have done is, you know, put a bracket here and done x plus y, so we could have saved one variable, but that's beside the point. There's also the $sign, but that's used as a identifier. So pretty much what an identifier does is that we can make like various identifiers. However, I don't have much experience with those, so I mean, we can still use them. It's kind of like as if we were using variables. However, I'm not gonna use, you know, the $sign. Pretty much the $sign is treated as a letter in a lot of names, so you can just use it as a regular variable. It's the same thing if I were to replace this x with a $sign. Let me actually do that and show that it actually does work, that there is actually no difference between that. So instead of x, I'm going to say I want to use the $sign variable, like a $sign like this, okay? And I'm going to comment this out. Yeah, so we've got it all commented out. And instead of using, I'm going to copy this section of code again, and I'm gonna place it right underneath it so you guys can see the difference. And I'm going to place it like that, and instead of using the x variable, I'm going to use the $sign variable, just to prove to you that it does work in fact the exact same way as if it was a regular variable. So if I save this and run this, it says it's a paragraph, and it says that x is not defined. What am I doing? Oh yeah, and here you need to change it as well. I was trying to figure out why it doesn't work right now. So instead of using x, when I use the $sign. So now, if I refresh this, it does the exact same thing. The only difference is I used a $sign instead of an x, and it's treated still the same way, so it doesn't really matter. And that's pretty much it. There's all there's to it. I really don't want to waste any more of your time. We already managed to get over 20 minutes. So I hope this was in some way, shape or form helpful for you guys. So really, it doesn't like matter. You can use $signs any way you want. You can use multiple $signs or just one. It's up to you. Again, all the code will be available on my GitHub page. I'm not sure what we're going to cover in the next video. I'm just gonna look through things, you know, try to, you know, see what is important and what's not. I just wanted to cover this so you guys know that there are multiple ways of interfacing with variables. So I hope this video was at least somewhat helpful for you guys. Make sure to hit the like button if you find it interesting. If you haven't subscribed and find this content interesting, subscribe, and I'll be making more videos about code or about various kinds of projects if you want me to do so. And on that note, I'll see you guys in the next one. Make sure to stay safe and have fun.